Welcome, goddesses, to yet another YouTube broadcast. And tonight's subject is one that most of us know really well: how to survive and thrive from domestic violence, which has been amplified during this coronavirus crisis while we've been in isolation and lockdown. And for those of you who know me, I receive guidance about which topics to address. And this is a very, very delicate subject. And the first thing I will say to you is, when it comes to abuse, once is too much. Now, the good news is, and this is why all these weekly broadcasts are about empowering you for your rise in 2020. And if ever there was a time that you can break free from your shackles, it's this year, goddesses. Now, on that note, before we delve into this this subject that 1 in 3 of us unfortunately know well, I'm going to say to you that because 2020 is destined to be the rise for the female leader, I have started a case study to feature female leaders who have been inspired to start their own business and become their own bosses during this crisis specifically, but also for those of you who have had a breakthrough that will inspire other women this year. So basically, it can be a breakthrough in health, wealth, relationships, or business, of course. So if you want to join the case study and be featured, let me know. And on that note, 2020 is actually destined to be our rise. And there is a video on this channel that you can watch as well. Because of that fact, any change you make, any breakthrough you make this year will be supported more so than ever before. So I want to address why, first of all, 1 in 3 of us are in this situation, and the reason that so many suffer from abusive relationships is because of our conditioning, our upbringing. Most of us, unfortunately, come from dysfunctional families, and also on a broader scale, the way that we've been conditioned in society, all these aspects play a role in the reason why abuse has been in a cycle. And unless we actually break that cycle, change will not happen. Now, as it happens, this year has shown us what the impact of the masculine running the world has brought us to. So more so than ever, for our cultural survival, it's very important that we bring balance to the world, which is yet another factor that will support your rise, whatever it is you want to break through from. So, the thing about the cycle of abuse, dysfunctional families, etc., quite often we're brought up in families where at least one person will launch into a rage, or there is an alcoholic in the family or a drug addict, or there is a tendency for a lot of arguments and things like that. So as we grow up, we think that that's normal behavior. But in actual fact, even if you've been in abusive relationships all your life, I can honestly tell you that that is not normal behavior, and there is a much, much better, happier, and healthier way to live. So we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty now. And, of course, again, before we go on, in terms of conditioning and the cycle of abuse, etc., what happens is then as we grow older, we get into self-destruction. And that has to do with our feelings that we instill when we are unfiltered in the early years of our life, and we basically absorb everything like sponges. Okay, so what happens then is we develop feelings of unworthiness, etc., that we perpetuate through our life, and in turn, these self-destructive tendencies that can include abuse of, substances, food, relationship addiction, all those things come into play. And of course, when someone is in self-destructive mode, they will go on a path of destruction with anyone that comes into their life. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to go into more detail, but those of you who have been through abuse will know the impact it has, which is quite severe, because in actual fact, we can lose our vitality for life. We can become a shadow of who we are. We start to question and doubt ourselves. We're unable to make decisions. We even blame ourselves, because that is part of the cycle of abuse. So in that cycle of abuse, we're blamed for something that someone else is doing. You will all know this if, you've been with a narcissist or someone who gaslights you, or, abuse comes in many forms. It can be verbal, emotional, and physical. And in the worst case scenario, when it's physical, then you are in real danger. And that's why it's really important that we are able to empower you to come through that to a better life. So we blame ourselves. We're in a constant state of fear. We feel unsafe. So those impacts are really quite severe when it comes to our life. Now, I can honestly tell you that I have been there. I have been through abusive relationships. And in actual fact, one relationship actually drove me crazy. And it was a case of, taking on all the blame, being blamed for everything. And then I was the one who was out going to get help, to see therapists, and all of that to compensate for that behavior. And I know if you can relate to this, you're welcome to comment and say yes. Okay. Now, the thing is that the fact that I actually did do that was the catalyst for my healing and growth from abusive relationships. And I can honestly tell you, having done the work, that I can now recognize signals from something as little as a text message or the way that someone speaks on the phone and what they say. So you can actually get to that stage, not only where you're attracting better, healthier, loving partners, but also to the stage where you can recognize signals straight away and stop them in their tracks. So, having said that, for too long, men have been intimidated by our power, goddesses. And we know this because we have been subjugated through the ages. So, what I can honestly tell you is that you are extremely powerful, goddess. And that is what we're going to lock into right now. So, all we have to do in terms of your power, because I recognize that when especially if you're in a situation at the moment, it's very, very difficult to see clear of that and to see anything different. So what we can do is, as a starting point, you can watch a video. What I recommend you do is watch a video on how to regenerate your power, because it's all about empowering you and helping you to access the power that you perhaps even forgot that you had. Okay, so you can watch that video on this channel, Coronavirus, How to Regenerate Your Power. Now, the only questions you really have to ask yourself is, one, Have I had enough? Now, if you've had enough, you will be able, truly had enough, you'll be able to scream it from the rooftops. I've had enough. I've had enough. When you've truly had enough, you will be able to make a change. The second question to ask yourself is, when you tune in and you know this, goddess, is there someone inside you that is absolutely bursting and dying to get out? Because that is the powerful goddess that we're addressing. Number 3, think about what would you do if you were actually free to do it? So these are the questions to ask yourself. Now, again, I recognize that it's very difficult to see a better future. And quite often, because the cycle of abuse actually wears down our self-esteem, and we do blame ourselves, it's very, very hard to see clear of the situation. So we think about things like, what about the kids? Or can I afford to live if I leave? Or, financial considerations, or considerations for the kids, considerations of what the family will say or your friends will say. Because quite often when we're in that situation of abuse, we actually feel really ashamed to even admit it. Now, again, if you relate to this, you're welcome to comment yes. One, because we're ashamed, perhaps because we feel that it is our fault, or we feel that our relationship was a failure, or we feel that we will be judged if we do speak out. This is an obstacle to overcome. Because again, goddess, when it comes to abuse, once is too much. Now, I'm going to get into some tips for you now. And I've actually pulled out one of these goddess cards, which I do every single week. And again, I've pulled out a card that is absolutely apt for the subject we're talking about. So the first tip I have for you is get help. Now, we're referring to that reluctance to be able to admit it to anyone. I know from women that I've coached that a lot of women are not able to tell anyone about it. So the first challenge I want to set to you, and the first tip I have for you, is to get help. Talk to a friend. Talk to someone that you trust. Join a group if you feel able to. Call the police if you can, or establish some kind of SOS mechanism, especially if you're in that right now and you're feeling scared, unsafe, and you're in fear. Establish an SOS. There are many, many services. The minute you can, there must be 1 minute that you are free to do that. Number 2, I want to, because self-esteem is something that is worn down so much, there is a free video that you can watch, and I've got the link in the comments, which is about setting yourself free. So there's a very simple and powerful exercise that you can do and tips that you can practice daily to boost your confidence to be able to do it, okay? So the next tip I have for you is if you are in a situation, start to gather evidence. Now, most of us have videos on our phones, right? So set up a phone and see if you can video events. You're not doing anything wrong. Never, ever let anyone tell you that you are wrong, goddess. You are perfect, okay? Now, the next step is to leave. Now, I recognize that this is hard. I do know, however, that many of you can leave, and you do leave, quite often for periods of time. Which brings me to my next tip, which is to stay away. Now, this is the real challenge. Because of the cycle of abuse as it is, there are ups and downs. Okay, so what happens is when the relationship is good, it's really, really good. And when it's bad, it's really, really bad. So when it's good, you'll find that you'll receive a lot of apologies and promises that this will never happen again, that things will get better. And what ends up happening is, and again, I'm going to talk about addiction because I'm talking about that pull, that cord that you actually feel pulling you back into a destructive, abusive relationship. Now, again, comment yes if you can relate to this. Because, and let me tell you, you are not alone. It's very common and it's not your fault. One thing I want you to know is that most of us do have addictions. And because all of us actually, none of us escape feeling that lack of self-worth. That's where that void and that hole that we feel when we're alone comes from. That's why many of us cannot be outside a relationship, because we need the validation from someone else. But when we talk about that, we're actually talking about love and sex addiction. And I don't want you to judge it, okay? We go into addictions, we medicate in one way or another to make ourselves feel better. So don't give yourself a hard time. It's not about that. No stress whatsoever. It's all about information, because information is power, goddess. And what we want to do is empower you to rise above it, especially this year that you're supported in so many different ways. The universe will really support you in 2020. Know this. Now, so there's a video you can watch, Set Yourself Free for a Boost of Confidence. I'm coming up to the biggest tip I have for you. The biggest tip. When you have finally decided that you've had enough, is to make the decision. That takes a lot of courage. Know that you've got this, goddess. All you have to realize is if you've had enough, if you've actually had enough, make the decision, and like Nike, just do it. If you have trouble staying away, get in touch. You can actually book in a free coaching session with me, or if you need ongoing support, even to practice those daily tips that you get from the videos. And there is another video that I can recommend to you actually, and it's on the link below, and that is how to transform all your relationships, because part of those bonus downloads and part of that online course will also tell you how to deal with irrational behavior to protect and support yourself in a healthy way. It will also describe the characteristics of love and sex addiction as opposed to a healthy way and a healthy love. So all of that information is in the online course that is on the same link as the free video for you on how to transform all your relationships. So again, if you're having trouble right now, know that you can book a free coaching chat with me. The other thing you can do, if you need ongoing support from an empowering and really supportive group of women, you can join our online group coaching. It happens every 2 weeks. So you'll be able to download in a very safe environment, release anything that you need to, be empowered to go on. So that is available for you as well. With that, my goddess says, we're now up to the goddess card for today and for this week for you. So I'm going to read it out to you. You're going to love it because it really confirms my guidance for you, okay? Now, this is the goddess Fortuna. The Roman goddess Fortuna was the same as an earlier Italian goddess who presided over Earth's abundance and controlled the destiny of all human beings. Her name derived from Fortuna, she who turns the year about, 2020, came to symbolize the capriciousness of life and luck, the vagaries of fate as the wheel of life turns around. And haven't we seen this with what's been happening, changing the entire way we live, goddesses? Her festival was celebrated in October. Fortuna gives us a way to approach the ups and downs of life, a perspective that can offer us some equanimity as we proceed on our journey and what I call the new normal, or this brand new era that we're launching into. So with that, I'm going to leave you now. I hope that empowers you, and please do get in touch. I've only touched the tip of the iceberg. This is a very, very serious matter and the hardest challenge to come out of. So in actual fact, if you have succeeded in coming out of a very abusive or an abusive relationship, and you think that your story will inspire other goddesses, get in touch and be part of the case study for 2020, the rise of the female leader. Namaste, goddesses. See you next week.